The president announced this gun review panel. Vice President Biden is going to lead it. Obviously, we have so many other issues on the table. Again, will the moment go by? And should the president also demand that this conversation be even broader? Because I think if it's just about guns and laws, that's one thing. But as we discussed earlier with our experts, this is a gun culture. This is a cultural problem in America. And a lot of folks don't want to talk about the culture part because, see, now that involves them beyond just laws.
Yeah. You know, the conversation needs to be as broad as possible. But I want to piggyback on something that Joe mentioned just right before the break. And it relates to this in the sense that let's assume that none of them have the moral courage to do anything. If you show those pictures and show the consequences of their actions, not just through the photographs, but through the testimony of the parents who could only identify their children based on what they wore to school that day, you will have such moral outrage in the country by parents, grandparents, and people that have any sense of humanity that at some point in time, if you have a critical mass, Congress has to do something. The NRA will be demonized, and Congress will have to do something just because they want to get reelected. They will have to listen to those parents, and the president has a moral obligation to broaden the discussion about the gun culture that we live in, about mental illness, and about figuring out why it is we live in a society where more often than not it is white males of a certain age that basically have lost something in their brain that allows them to engage in mass murders. The country needs to be engaged, and the country wants this to happen.
We already have police in Black and Latino schools. And it is not a pretty picture in terms of what's happening to our students. But that becomes then the rationale for that as a solution. So unless we go in and say, look, we want bans on assault weapons, that ban expired in 2004.
That is a start. See, I think people keep acting as if, oh, we got to wait for all kinds of different things. No, I say that's a start. You have to start somewhere, some starting point to actually go down this path. And so, look, we'll start.
One more point on that.
Real quick, because I want to get to the fiscal cliff, talk about what the heck happened to Speaker Boehner this week. So real quick.
I think another element that's critically missing in this debate is just the spirit, the element of the soul. What do people believe? I mean, when you start having debates about whether or not God should be in the platform or religion should be taught in the schools. And when you start removing that element from our society, slowly but surely, good, bad, or indifferent, you have unintended consequences. So I think another thing that needs to be put in this debate as we start talking about gun control is just the human spirit. Where are we going as a culture? What are our beliefs? What are our
Joe
values?
Wants to respond before I go to fiscal cliff. Real quick, Joe.
I'll just say God and guns. Isn't that what we heard conservatives say? God and gun. That's all we heard. Pennsylvania, God and guns, God and guns. With right-wing conservatives, they don't separate the two. So it's not that God isn't in our spirit. That's not the issue here.
What's going on with that guy? When you go out and do something like that,
once again, you don't hear liberals running around talking. That's right. You don't hear liberals running around talking about God. I'm not finished. Gods and guns. Now, whose quote is that? Those are right-wing conservatives that push God and guns. You will not bother my God, and you will not take my gun. So you got God in it.
Clearly, there's something cultural and spiritual.
You brought up God.
Here's the deal, though. Jesus Christ is my Lord and Savior. I fired a gun one time. I have no desire to own a gun. Don't need one. Look, and I grew up in a neighborhood where the crack house, I could stand on my porch and see it being taken down by the DEA. So for me, it's not the question of the spirit that's going on. When I talk about culture, I'm talking about the fact that you have people out there who, frankly, put more faith in their guns than in their God.
Yeah, but my point is when you start removing prayer and spirit and just God and religion away from society, you're going to get unintended consequences.
But Elroy, there are people. First of all, we don't know if this kid came from a religious family. That's first.
Right.
I mean, and let's be clear. That has nothing to do with it.
You need to make sure we have that in this.
By the way, I just want to say the Ku Klux Klan does pray at their meetings.
We have to deal with the reality that, look, we can try to say it's about prayer in school. Let me be real clear about prayer in school. Any kid right now can pray 5 times a day, 10 times a day in a school. Maybe part of the problem is that you have 2 Christian households who aren't training their kids to be Christians at school. And they are. So again, saying a prayer over the speakerphone, that's not actually the issue.
I'm not offering
that is,
to me,
that is not an issue when it comes to this. At the end of the day, the problem is you got too many people who say they love God in Congress and in state houses who do not want to remove guns, especially the assault weapons and high-powered magazines from this culture. So maybe godly people, the same folks who saying pray for the families, need to show some guts and say remove high-powered magazines and those kind of weapons, and then we can all pray then.
Well, we just injected God into this discussion.
First of all,
I did. And I hope it stays in the discussion.
God never leaves my conversation, but I'm also willing to call out so-called godly people who love to bring that up, but then who also, again, are more apt to pray to the NRA and not to Jesus.
Well, and I think that was your point. I think that's his point. We saw Paul Ryan when he was the vice presidential nominee. We saw the U.S. Conference of Bishops come out and call him out and say he is a Catholic, but what he wants to do in terms of cutting entitlements does not follow the teachings of Jesus. So you need people who are on the right side of Jesus to call out those who say that they follow a glorious God who thinks it's okay to have assault weapons that are used to mass murder children.
I'm going to call out all these crazy fools out here who continue to say, oh, this happened because we don't have prayer in school, because we want to take the Christ out of Christmas. No. The problem is we have it's a number of factors that deals with mental illness, that deals with video games, that deals with depression, that deals with parents who have children who are mentally ill, who are keeping high-powered weapons in the household for them to have access to. And so all of those things, and that's why I'm saying I think part of the problem I have with this conversation is become solely about gun and a law. And what I'm saying is the law to me is a piece of this issue. It's a piece. Mental illness is another piece, but you got to deal with the culture. If you don't confront the culture of this problem,
it doesn't stop.
It doesn't stop.
Yeah.
Doesn't stop.
And if you don't interject God into dealing with the culture, you definitely won't stop.
No, I interject God, but what I also say is tell those Republicans and those Democrats, if you believe in God, put God before the guns. Yeah. Okay? Because that G-O-D is more important than your G-U-N. Michelle, Elroy, Leila McDowell, thanks a bunch.